Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we are talking about Superman Legacy, as we will be doing probably quite a lot in the coming days, weeks, and months because the movie is about to go into production. It's literally going to production days from now. And because of that, there's all kinds of questions being thrown at the actors who are part of this movie. And one of those said actors happens to be Rachel Brosnahan, who has been cast as our new Lois Lane. It's one of the most iconic characters in all of comic book history. It's one of the most iconic characters in comic book movies on put to screen, and we're finally going to be getting something where it's going to be a little bit more of a your classic take on the character compared to less what we've been seeing in recent years, with whether it's on TV or on film, with the Man of Steel version of Lois Lane, or the one that we have been seeing with Superman and Lois. This version is going to be probably a little more like Margot Kidder's version from the Superman movie in 1978. Now, Rachel Brosnahan was recently on the SAG red carpet. Of course, she's won a few SAG awards in the past for the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, a show that's now over. But of course, I think she was nominated from the last season of the show, and she got asked a few questions. Variety, Deadline, they all interviewed her, and one of the things that they talked about was the super suit, and she gave her reaction to what she thinks about the new Superman suit. And then of course she was asked about the table read, how did that go, and she had some really good, cool thoughts about where the script stands, what needs to be done, where they're at with it, and as far as also her character, what she's doing to prepare to play Lois Lane, especially now that they're days away from starting to film. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to be on set a few days from now. It just means that when the movie starts filming, they don't really shoot the movie in the order that you see it, and so they might just start with when they say they're going to start filming in a few days, there could be second unit photography. It could be scenes involving some of the other characters, and not Lois Lane. But nonetheless, Rachel Brosnahan is preparing, and she made some comments about it on the red carpet. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to go into some detail, and as always, we're going to try to gain some insight into what her comments mean for the movie itself, for Superman Legacy. So, as always, to talk about that and so much more, of course, I've got with me John. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Kind of a big thing that, happened with this. Again, we've been kind of saying this for the past few months. We're like really, really getting there. And the fact that we're getting it, next week is just crazy. Whether that be, with her or with how they're, depending on how they film it, is just really cool. So she was saying both at least to Variety, she was saying, that the table read was really amazing. How some of the people met for the first time, some met, um, they had met up already and are, doing doing all this. So familiar faces, not so familiar faces, all that jazz. And she was saying like the table read was a success. It was amazing. She mentioned that there was going to be a lot of action sequences, which of course it's a Superman film, that's par for the course, but a lot is still, or what a lot are we talking about? Are we talking Zack Snyder a lot, or are we talking Superman 2 a lot? Because that's two different a lots. So that'll be certainly interesting, and how like everything was paced, how everything read through with these characters,
Yeah.
learning their voice, how to talk about these characters, what worked, what didn't work, and it was and she was just talking about how great the table read was, which is always a fun thing. Um, but and then of course she mentions like, oh yeah, I used to watch Superman as a kid, the Richard Donner Superman. It's like, yeah, you and everybody else did. I mean, no offense, I'm sure she's a fan. Like she has gone on to say how much she loves Lois Lane, how she had read comics as a kid and all that. But it's like, oh yeah, I watched Superman the movie. It's like, well, everyone did. If you were coming and be like, yeah, I watched the what was it, Gerard Christopher Superboy show, would be like, okay, yeah, that's
The
definitely
adventure, yeah, super,
unique. I'll give you that. So but yeah, that's you know, good to see, like, trying to get it in. I know a lot of these guys kind of say things like that and all that. So, you know, they just want to make sure to, get fans excited and be excited about the project. She was, she's saying how much she loved Lois Lane, how she loves that character. She's like trying to find her voice as the character, which is great. And she also said how much she's a fan of James Gunn, and she liked how she was like, it was good to have a director who knows what to do in terms of this on both sides. Obviously you have Guardians, and then you have the Suicide Squad, as well as Peacemaker, so he's dabbled with both sides, a lot of it. So she was happy with that. Like, okay, we're not like all going in blind. We're going in blind, Core and Sweat, her, most of the cast, not all of them. I mean, Eddie Gathegi and Isabella Merced, they've been part of superhero projects before, but they're making the jump to DC. So, she was excited how, Gunn has that experience, and she's been a fan of his work for a while. So, she's like, obviously I'm nervous because, like, it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, I'm playing this weird obscure character for the first time on screen, and we'll get to that in a minute. But she's like, well, I'm playing Lois Lane. She's just as iconic as, the Big Blue Boy Scout. So she's like, there is that nervousness there. And speaking of the Big Blue Boy Scout, she mentioned how she did see the suit, that good old super suit, um and how she was blown away. Obviously she can't mention anything specific because, you got to keep it hush hush for the time being, no pun intended. She's, wrong superhero, yes, I know, but still, it's all DC. But she was just saying like, oh, the suit's great, we are, we're really, really, full steam ahead, that kind of thing. And she's obviously, you know, excited for all this, like, to carve her, etching into the grand, wall of Lois Lanes and Supermans and iterations and reboots and all that. So there's all that. And I think it's really great how, you still have these actors that are still trying to find the voice, like, just to make it really right. And, she's really, you know trying to, they're all trying to, obviously they're not going to say, oh yeah, the script sucked, we're all going to go where it's going to be filming and it's going to be terrible. Obviously they're not going to say that. Like, the script could suck, we don't know, but, like, I like how she's saying, like, we are tweaking these characters still, because obviously it takes a lot to really get in the mind of someone who isn't you, who isn't, you know, this isn't who I am all day, every day. Like, we know that. But I like how there's like, okay, we're still trying to find our voice. And I really liked that. And I feel like, again, I feel like when Brosnahan was cast, I was like, oh yeah, that's near perfect casting right there. Like, with considering how Mrs. Maisel is essentially Lois Lane, but as a comedian, like, I hate to, oversimplify that
Right,
character.
right.
She's,
That's fair.
she's
Yeah.
more than that, but, like, just like the vibe I get of that character, especially, as a character that takes place for the most part in the 50s, 60s, getting that, like, kind of golden age, silver age vibe a little bit. So I feel like, she nailed that. I've only seen one episode of the show. I was in the room when my parents were watching it. So I just, as a casual, like, looking up from my phone every once in a while, like, oh, that's interesting. And then when she was cast, I'm like, okay, I've only seen one episode of the show, but she's perfect. She's nailed it already. So, and I feel like Corn Sweat, yes, has been fan cast as Superman for years, mainly due to his resemblance to Henry Cavill. But I think, he definitely gets, a lot of things right. Like, I've heard he's great in The Politician. I think it's called, where, he has a lot of, like, grand speeches about, like, like the future and all that. So that definitely fits Superman. And I feel like in the movie Pearl, He also nailed like that southern like charm that you would need for obviously the Clark Kent side of things. So I think he definitely, nails both of those. But obviously Rachel Brosnahan, she's perfect. And but yeah, I think she's perfect. I think, hearing this from her and knowing that we're filming soon, it's like, oh, that's great. That's perfect. And then on top of that, you have another thing I wanted to mention on this big old filibuster was, Anthony Kerrigan was also interviewed. I know Rachel Brosnahan, she's the big, you know, Lois Lane. She is essentially the biggest supporting character in that movie. So you have that, and then on top of that, you have Anthony Kerrigan, which is so far in terms of the other side, where Metamorpho is a character. I believe he's appeared in a couple animated things here and there.
Never in live
But
action. I mean,
but
it's also
never
a
in live
character
action.
that's not very live action.
Very well
It's
known.
not a very mainstream character. It's kind of like
No.
before the Suicide Squad, Polka Dot Man. Nobody would even think that character existed. No less,
Yeah.
the cast him for the movie. But of course, David Dashmalkian did a fantastic job with the role. I mean, to the
Oh
point
yeah.
that he was one of the highlights of the whole movie, and they were talking about doing a spin-off. So as far as potential goes, we have seen in recent times that you don't need to be a leading character in your movie to break out and then have, your own little franchise set up out of it. And I feel like Anthony Kerrigan most definitely has the talent to,
Oh yeah. He's
turn this appearance into a whole. He can get a spin-off film and then even a trilogy depending on
Yeah,
where they
and
want to take the
then, well,
character.
when they inevitably do a Terrifics movie, maybe down the line he'll be part of that, or an Outsiders movie, or whenever they do a Justice League movie. He's been all over the map, Metamorpho. And Anthony Kerrigan, I mean, he was the best part of Barry easily. He was my favorite character on that show. He was so exceptional. He was so funny, like because it's like I think he was getting interviewed for Barry, and he's like, as a guy who like dealt with like having alopecia and all that, like I'm usually seen as like a like kind of quote unquote scary guy, and like being in a lot of villain roles. Like he was Calabac, I think, in a bit part in X-Men Apocalypse. He was in there for like 2 minutes, and he's like, but the fact that I'm playing like now this character who's so silly and he's so funny, he's like, who's like who you would imagine as someone's here, like he's part of the Russian mob, and he's like, oh, that's like this scary fucking dude, but he's like so goofy and he's so silly and he's so like naturally funny
It
and charismatic. Like he is like like he was. I mean, don't get me, especially when you have Bill Hader, who is also exceptionally funny, like whether he is playing
it's
the straight
hard.
man like in the
Like, when
show
you're
or not.
acting next to Bill Hader, it's hard to kinda, be
Yeah,
able to match that energy and
yeah,
not look a lesser actor. And
yeah.
because, Bill Hader is so talented, um, and Anthony Kerrigan does it, very well.
Yeah, oh, most definitely.
Yes.
Because I think what really helped is that he was like kind of like the quote unquote plucky comic relief, while Bill Hader is the straight man, where he's played the straight man in other stuff before, but he's also, played a lot of like overly goofy characters. But I think that really helped that dynamic. I think that made him pop a little bit more than, usual, where oh yeah, I forgot he was on Gotham.
He was on Gotham, yeah.
I mean, I never watched the show, so I
Well,
watched
that show
actually I
it
watched like 2 episodes, but
that show went off the rails for me,
I think he was
after the
Victor
first
Zsasz
season.
on that show,
I
actually.
think
Now that
because the thing was the first season they were they stuck to the premise, and then they were like, "Okay, well, we need Batman." And then they started to, kinda, take
Oh
a
yeah,
U-turn
let's
and an extra U it
introduce
just
everybody. Let's have Mr.
it was
Freeze. Let's
yeah,
have,
and it just 'cause
Bane. Let's have the mutant leader from Dark Knight Returns. It's like, what are we doing?
I I didn't understand. I mean, but, he was still he was still one of the better parts of the show in terms of just the
I believe it.
entertainment value. He was yeah, and
Was he on
the
The
other thing I was
Flash
gonna
too? Oh
I
yeah,
was
he
is he
was
from The
missed.
Flash?
Holy shit, he was in the pilot of, or not the pilot. He was in like season 1 of The Flash. I
Things
forgot
You
that.
Can't
He was
Outrun.
missed. Yeah,
Oh, that's
damn.
cool. Okay, so he's got a
He's like
his
David Dastmalchian. He's been everywhere in terms of, these characters.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, and look, so he can pull off he doesn't need to be bald. He can pull off the hair. He can pull off
oh yeah,
different looks. And
I
one
think
of the
that was
things I will say
before, yeah,
about
he
a
was diagnosed. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, one of the things I was gonna say about, Anthony Carrigan here is that it seems like James I mean, I guess more so about even James Gunn, his approach to casting these roles is equally as because one of the things that we find to be a rarity in Hollywood is, especially with roles in comic book movies, where there's a lot of fan castings happening. Usually, fan castings, if you look for a trend, people tend to wanna see somebody who's gonna physically, visually match the character as they see it in the comics as close as possible. That's kind of the reason why, people weren't into the idea of Tom Holland being cast in the what's that movie, the one with Mark Wahlberg. I thought Mark Wahlberg should have been Nathan Drake, but anyway, I think they're doing a sequel. And then Pedro Pascal being cast in The Last of Us, people are like, wait, or like even for Fantastic Four, they're like, and then when the artwork came out, some people were like, oh, so Reed Richards is gonna have a mustache. Or like when Christian Bale was cast as Batman. I mean, well, everybody was cast for Batman. Nobody seem to like those. But the so you either and then sometimes you hit it nail on the head, like Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man. I don't think a lot of other than the fact that he was in like his brand, if you want to call it, was down in the dumps. I think people said, look, he looks like Tony Stark, and then of course the acting job that he did with the movies, his career that it turned around his career. It basically built the foundation for the MCU. Now, it's rare though that you see a casting where it's that perfect, where you visually match kind of the look that the comics are have established that the audience goes for, because some characters have different looks. Like Bruce Wayne has many different looks across comics. Superman, Clark Kent has many different looks. In this case, what you're gonna see is you're gonna see a metamorpho that resembles the comic book version, but at the same time, you're getting an actor that is brilliant and knows how to play the role really, really well. And that's something, or I hope so at least. But I think the talent, is there. Um, and I've noticed a pattern. I've noticed a pattern with James Gunn, and I want to get your opinion on this because I feel like what James Gunn is doing, he's like saying, okay, we don't have to compromise. We don't need to like go for somebody who's gonna fit the role because like they're a great actor and they're super talented and they get it. We can also find somebody who's gonna like match that classic. Like he wants to stay truer to the comics as much as possible, and he's not willing to as easily sacrifice that. I'm sure there'll be examples where you'll see a casting and you'll be like, I don't know if that looks like the character, but then you'll see probably like Colin Farrell getting cast as a penguin. It's like who would have thought like what they pulled off with him. So what are your thoughts on this in terms of the approach to casting that James Gunn has taken with
I
this
think
movie?
that's kind of a good thing. I think like we've gotten a little bit loosey goosey with um like staying true to the comics. Like I understand like comics are a
Yeah,
source. You don't have to follow the source exactly because that's boring because it's like, oh, we're just getting these amazing stories either on the screen that are just as good as the original comics or done worse. So it's like
right.
either or. It's rare that the movie is better than the comic. The only two I can think of are Logan and Civil War. And even then, I don't like Civil War, the movie or the comic, but that's beside the point. And then Old Man Logan is terrible, but the movie was excellent. So because they only took like the bits and pieces that worked and then essentially forged their own path. So they have all that. And with and but yeah, going back to Anthony Carrigan, he was saying, I'm bringing to life a character that hasn't been done before. There's some pressure. I don't think there's as much pressure because he's such a small character that I think
It's
I don't
you
think
could
there's
quite
too much
frank.
to
It's like a
worry about.
blank
But
canvas, right?
yeah,
Like it's just build on. You have nothing to build on. You can start fresh. There's no
yeah, because
expectation
it's not
of
like David Corenswet where he has to live up to 15 different actors
yeah.
who's played the role, all of them almost spectacularly to varying
I mean,
degrees.
people, especially because like with him, it's like with Henry Cavill, they obviously compared him to Brendan Routh and Christopher Reeve at the time. as well as some of the others like Dean Cain and such. But then we knew from or like even the first trailer that the Henry Cavill Superman was going to be different. So some of that, and then of course there was some backlash to with that, and then so on and so forth. But with this Superman, David Cornsweet is playing a much more classic version. At least that's what James Gunn has been, he continues to promote. You look at all the artwork that he has put up on his social accounts, and like I put together a few of these pictures. I'm like, he's always putting together these classic looks rather than what we have seen in recent times, that are closer to like the Kingdom Come story or like the All Star Superman, things of that nature. So David Cornsweet is gonna get compared directly to Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve, the Superman who Kevin Feige, the most successful producer in Hollywood of all time, recently said that whenever they're going to do a new MCU origin story, they go watch Superman from 1978 to just kind of like brush up on their
Yeah.
skills. Now,
Which
you could take
does
that the
bring
wrong way,
problems of its own, but that's beside the
but
point.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying, it's like you to kind of support your point. It's true. Like there's a lot of pressure when you're playing a character like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. I mean, like at this point, probably even like if they were to recast Iron Man at some point or Captain America, these iconic, or like James Bond. Like there's other examples of this, right? Like, or if, like for example, when Chris Pine was cast as Captain Kirk in the Star Trek reboot with J.J. Abrams, it's like you're gonna have a lot of because people it's the pressure of expectation, and
Yeah.
and Anthony Carrigan doesn't have that. I think that's
Yeah.
great.
I think like because and the fact it's a fairly unknown character, like he's like a C-lister at best. So I think that helps. I think the pressure is like this is gonna be the basis of
Yeah,
he's gonna be technically the quote unquote Christopher Reeve of Metamorpho, which obviously doesn't because I mean I know there were other Supermen before, but I mean on the big screen because obviously you have George Reeves, you have Kirk Allen, you had those guys, and Christopher Reeve was not the first, but he was the first one on the big screen. So this is gonna be
right.
the first Metamorpho on the big screen, and on top of that, first one in live action. So I feel like because it's like the fact that like Aquaman, that worked was amazing. The fact that the first Wonder Woman worked was miraculous. Because I mean, what happens to like other Justice League members? You get the Flash and you get Green Lantern, which were terrible. So the fact that those characters finally got like a good movie, that's going to be the basis. Wonder Woman from 2017 is going to be the basis for. I mean, if we live that long, this earth keeps us around for humanity that much longer. But if we're in if we're in like the 3000s and we're still cranking out movies and we're still doing this shit, well then Wonder Woman is gonna be that Gal Gadot's gonna be that basis. Jason Momoa is gonna be that basis for Aquaman. So and the fact that they were that good, luckily they were that good. They now they'll be the basis, and that's kind of awesome.
Yeah,
But like again, there's like they
maybe
had the
like
pressure, then they there was another there's different like pros and cons of like all of this. There's different like
yeah,
pressures and other pressures of like everything.
yeah.
I don't think John Cena cared that he was going to be the first Peacemaker or that Adrian or Freddie Stroma was going to be the first Vigilante because essentially they didn't do those characters. They did like complete opposites of those characters. So
True.
it there's a whole mess of things of
I mean, but we have also seen
the
with like the
basis of
Batman.
live
Yeah.
action and not
Like yeah, and to that point, like you said, like we have seen these new original takes on characters like the Batman with Robert Pattinson, where he is at its core Batman, but he's very different from any other Batman we have seen on screen. I mean, in so many ways, the fact that the color red is so closely tied together with that version of Batman compared to I mean, we've seen how many Batman movies over the years at this point, like, going back
400.
even to like the 50s and 60s. I think there was a black and white Batman movie before like the
Yeah, there
the
was a
live
film
action
serial back in the 40s. Yeah.
TV show. So the Adam West one. I mean, yeah, so it's you can still do new stuff, and but yeah, I mean, Anthony Carrigan is an actor who's got all kinds of talent, and then of course going back to Rachel Brosnahan,
Of course, yeah.
she of course it has the other side of it, which is she's gonna be compared to Margot Kidder. She's gonna be compared to Amy Adams. She's even gonna be compared to Superman and Lois and Bitsy Tulloch, like the most
Yeah,
recent
Terry Hatcher as
iteration,
well,
because
yeah.
yeah, I mean that show is gonna
Kelsey
be
Durant,
coming off
they're
the
all
air months before Superman Legacy comes out. So
I
yeah,
mean, but the thing is there could be also a new basis. Like, for instance, I mean, when it comes to the character of Lex Luthor, Gene Hackman's never brought up anymore. It's always Michael Rosenbaum over this like rinky
yeah.
dink little fucking Superman origin show that nobody gave a shit about.
Well, you should,
Well,
but the
well, I
thing
would
is
say
that,
nobody, but like it
dude,
was
that
like
show ran for
it
10
was it
years,
was a
10
cultural
seasons.
phenomenon. I'm not gonna
It's
lie
People
that, but like
forget how popular that show was, I feel, right? Like
yeah,
it still holds the record for the longest running sci-fi TV show of all time, because it ran for like a full, I think it ran for like a solid 10
well,
seasons.
longest
And I know
sci-fi
this.
American show
Okay, fair. Because
for
I
sure.
remember like watching. I'm a big Stargate fan, and I'm like, yes, no, yes, I agree with you there. That's definitely Doctor Who, but Doctor Who and like James Bond are like kind of they exist in their own subgenre. I feel like, but anyway,
Almost,
um,
yeah,
like they're kind of their own. They're not even like So anyway, I'm not gonna go on that tangent right now.
yeah.
But yeah, because I got into the whole. I was like, I'm like Stargate SG-1 had the record like 8 years, ran the longest running sci-fi show on TV, U.S. or Canadian, I suppose. And then like Smallville ran for 10 years, and like that is considered that longest. So it was super successful, and you're right, because Gene Hackman had what, a fraction of the screen time if you compare the amount of minutes he was on screen in the movies that he was a part of versus what we got with Michael Rosenbaum. And it's a generational thing, like 1978 versus 2008. Like it's there's a 30-year gap.
To be fair,
So,
I mean, Christopher Reeve is always and forever brought up. Like, Christopher
but
Reeve will forever be brought up, but Gene Hackman is usually not brought up that much in terms of Lex Luthor, from what I've noticed. It's usually the
yes,
go-tos in terms of these characters are Christopher Reeve for Superman, Margot Kidder for Lois Lane, but Michael Rosenbaum for Lex Luthor. That's just how fucking amazing he was on that show. Say
yeah,
what you will about the show. It's got lovers, it's got naysayers, it's,
yeah,
retrospect. It was, like cheesy, you know,
yeah,
cable TV series. Not a bad show, but like, it had it had a good run. It had a
yeah.
lot of good aspects to it and all that. But
You know,
like the fact that Michael Rose, like it just rose him up.
it's
That dude just delivered every aspect of that character, and he's still the go-to. Like, ignoring the fact like did serve technically the longest. Tom Welling's never fucking brought up. He's like, he's like, yeah, okay,
I mean,
another
he is
cog in the wheel.
sometimes,
He's
but
like once in a while, like people when people see him, like, when they see like Superman on TV, like he's like kind of brought up from time to time. But it's Lex Luthor. I always see like when Nicholas Holt was cast, I remember like the fucking comment section on every article, on every Facebook post, it was always, yeah, he might be good, but he'll never be Michael Rosenbaum. Like, no, he's like
dude,
the fucking god of Lex Luthor,
because
and I'm
like
sure the actual Lex
yeah.
Luthor would be happy to know that because he sees himself as a god. So, so I feel like it's almost always him. Not and I think is I can't judge. I have never seen an episode of Smallville. I'm sure he's amazing. He was great as Wally West. I have seen a bit of Justice League, so of the animated series. So the man can do it all. He can do heroes. He can do villains. So like
it
it's always it's
Yeah,
he's the man. He is the
it's
man.
no, he is.
He is
And
Lex.
no, I agree with you there. And the other thing about Michael Rosenbaum is, when they were trying to cast Lex Luthor, I know there are a lot of fan casts were still, they wanted Michael Rosenbaum. They were like, what? Kind of like when they wanted Grant Gustin to play like the cinematic Flash, and they were like,
Yeah.
all right, reboot. I mean, they missed that will still come up. Grant Gustin will still come up in fan castings when they
Yeah.
finally decide to do some like a Flash project.
He just mentioned a couple days ago, he's like, "Hey, if James
Yeah.
Gunn calls, I'm not gonna say no.
I mean,
I'm
and
going.
you'd be
If he
dumb
gives
to
me
say
that, if he
no.
gives me that call, I will." Same with Stephen Amell. He's like, "If I
Yeah.
get a call, awesome. If I don't, well, that's okay. But I'm
Yeah.
open. I'm all ears."
Exactly. So, I mean, yeah, and then to that point, yeah, I mean, if you were still getting fan casted in new iterations of the character you already played for that long, that is iconic. Now, I mean, hopefully Rachel Brosnan's Lois Lane can become that iconic because I mean, in my mind, Amy Adams did a pretty good job with the character, but as far as the general audience, it feels like that Lois version of Lois Lane didn't quite connect the way people still, harken back to the Margot Kidder Lois Lane from back in the day. And even the Bitsy Tulloch one feels like it's a nice happy in between of those two
Hmm.
cinematic versions, and so people like that. But I mean, it looks like we're going much more classic here. Speaking of classic, of course, Rachel Brosnahan did, she was like asked about the suit, and she was like, "Well, I saw the suit. It's so classic." Let me see if I can pull up the exact quote in this article. She was like, she's talking about how she's preparing, and then when they ask her about the suit at the table read, she's like, "I got to see the suit, and I was blown away." And I don't know why they had to then clarify that they were talking about Superman's suit. I'm like you mentioned before we started, it's not like Lois Lane needs a super suit. So I'm like, why the
Yeah. I mean, I
clarification?
understand there was that
I don't
episode
know.
of Lois and Clark where she got superpowers for a hot sec,
But
but like,
like that's I don't think we're
what are
going
you talking about?
there.
Lois
But
Lane's pantsuit? Like, what do you think we're talking about?
yeah, I mean, look, whenever anybody talks about super suits, the only thing I can think of is that scene from The Incredibles with Frozone, which is one of the best named superheroes of all time. Speaking of which,
Where's my super suit? What? Where is my super suit?
I can't get
I
over it.
mean,
That's always
speaking
that's
of
where my mind
Superman,
goes. Yeah,
Brad Bird did direct the best Superman adaptation and the best Fantastic Four adaptation without even trying. So I'm
yeah.
just, the
It's
get Brad Bird to direct a Superman movie, for God's sake. Fucking when James Gunn is like doing 12 million projects for the DCU, we just want to see Brad Bird direct a Superman movie with Brainiac as the main villain. Come on, can we get that, please? For the love of God, we just need to see that, please. That would be amazing. Thank you, sincerely,
yes.
everyone.
Yeah, anybody who like watches this video, please forward this along. Let's get Brad Bird into like James Gunn's DMs somehow, and then we'll see if somehow that can happen in the future. I look ultimately, the movie is going into production. Superman Legacy will start filming in a few days from now, and of course, Rachel Brosnahan, David Cornsweet, James Gunn himself directing. You've got a huge cast. We have looked at the cast like that image, is still uh going viral. Like we put it up earlier. Let me put it up here. They've got a stacked cast, and that cast still might be missing a couple of people who would be making maybe surprise cameos and whatnot. And of course, there will be other characters that we are not seeing, but this movie is happening. It's finally happening. We're no longer having to wait. Or I guess we will have to wait, but like it's there's tangibility to it. You'll get behind the scenes photos. We'll start getting sneak peeks at it. I bet you they're gonna do like a big reveal for the super suit. I just remembered that scene again from The Incredibles. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to this movie. I can't wait to see what starts coming out, whether it's officially from James Gunn's Twitter or Threads or Instagram account, or people just taking pictures because they're shooting somewhere in a city, whether it's Atlanta or London or wherever, or if they're at a sound stage. Let's hopefully we'll get some behind the scenes featurette. Let's see what they bring to Comic-Con this year. But as all that comes out, we'll be here, guys. Like if you enjoy talking about DC, then come interact with us. We are live every day from Monday through Friday on DCU Daily. And we talk about Superman Legacy a lot because that's the big kahuna right now in the DC, the brand new, newly christened DCU, I should say. And of course, as we get more news about Creature Commandos, as we get more news about the Batman Part 2, as well as, of course, Joker Folie 2, these other projects that are in development, DCU, DC Elseworlds, and everything DC related, as well as some other, crazier, more out there projects. A preview of what's to come maybe later in the week. Do check back in. You've got a pretty out there story that I think John has some strong opinions that we'll be talking about in the next couple of days. So definitely tune in, because let's just say that DC might get Jurassic on your ass in a few in a few months, in a couple of years. I mean, it's in development. We'll talk about it. And if you know about the story, then you know. So we'll check back in with you tomorrow, of course. Thanks, John, for joining in. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you and talking about Superman Legacy, all things DC. As always, go out there and watch something DC related. Come back here and tell us all about it. We'd love to chat with you all about DC and so much more. And until next time, it's been great talking about Superman Legacy. I'm sure we'll be back here again. And have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, and we'll see you tomorrow on DCU Daily.